Good morning, everyone. This is the County Press for February the 24th, read by Barry and
Sonara.
And we have, first of all, we begin with Society News for Friday, for the 24th of February. Tuesday, there will be 2 coffee mornings held in aid of the Society on Tuesday the 28th of February. The first at West White, end of the line cafe, from 10:30am to 12pm, and Bembridge, the Cloisters, 10:15am, 12pm. Please go along and support these if you are able to. The Dolphins will be swimming this coming Tuesday evening, Tuesday the 28th of February, at the Waterside Pool in Ryde. The swimming group has sole use of the pool during the session, and there are lifeguards in attendance. If you are interested in joining the group, please contact the Society to advise us of your swimming ability and for us to advise the Waterside Pool. Wednesday. The weekly coffee morning will be held as usual to support the Society this Wednesday, the 1st of March. The coffee mornings are not just for blind and partially sighted people. Anybody can come along and have a cup of coffee or tea as well as a piece of cake. Don't forget, the Macular Degeneration Society meets on the first Wednesday of each month as part of the coffee morning at Millbrook House. This Wednesday, Tom McNulty, the Macular Society's regional manager for the South East, will be joining the group. He will talk about the Macular Society, living with the condition and upcoming research. If you would like to listen to Tom or have any questions for him, then please come along. And on Thursday, that's the 2nd of March, the Knitters and Natterers will be meeting at Millbrook House. The group meets at 10:30am to 2pm. As well as the knitting, there is plenty of nattering, as well as volunteers that come in and read to the group during the afternoon. Any other news? Review of assisted refuse collections. As you may be aware, the Isle of Wight Council, working in partnership with AMY, offer a free assisted collection service to residents who may have difficulties presenting their waste and recycling on their allocated collection date. As a visually impaired person, you might currently benefit from this service. The Isle of Wight Council are conducting an annual review of all registered assisted collection properties and will shortly be sending out letters asking if those who already use the service still require it. Along with the letter will be a form for you to complete. These forms will need to be returned by a certain date, yet to be disclosed. If the forms are not returned, the Council will conclude the service is no longer required, and your address will be taken off their assisted collection service register. If you require assistance with the form, then you can contact the Isle of Wight Council on 01983 823 777. Then we have news of the quiz night at the Waverley in Carisbrooke in support of the Isle of Wight Society for the Blind. Thursday the 2nd of March 2017. It starts at 7:30pm. Tickets are £3 per person. Food is not included but may be ordered before the quiz. There are teams of 4. Please pre-book tables by calling the Waverley Inn on 01983 522 338. Annual General Meeting date 13th of March 2017. The AGM will be on the 13th of March at Millbrook House at 10:30am. Guarantor members will receive the notice and other papers at least 21 days before the meeting. The AGM will be followed by a forum. Please submit any questions to the board by the 6th of March to enable us to prepare detailed responses. Then we have a Brading Roman Villa special day. On Friday the 17th of March, Brading Roman Villa is holding a special day for visually impaired people on the island. There will be guided tours of the museum, as well as opportunities to handle artefacts from the museum. Should there be a large number of people wishing to attend, the staff at the museum will break up the large group into smaller groups. Anyone wishing to attend must register their interest with the Isle of Wight Society for the Blind first. There may also be an opportunity to handle some tactile artwork by the Isle of Wight artist Lindy Moles. This is a free event, but you will have to pay for your own refreshments at the museum, and anyone requiring transport may have to pay a small fee towards fuel. And now we have the scaffolding news. Please find below a list of known footway obstructions for works, including scaffolding or hoarding. We are unable to include end dates, as many are extended on a week-by-week basis. Also included are tables and chairs permits that have been issued in the past week. Here we have the areas. Bay Area, 11A St John's Road, Sandown; Napoleon's Landing, Esplanade, Sandown; 2A York Road, Sandown; Traville Hotel, Esplanade, Sandown; European Court, Melville Street Side, Sandown; The Ocean Hotel, High Street, Sandown; Artie Shakes, 8 Falcon Cross Road, Shanklin; New Cherry Pickers Cranes, Shanklin Cliff Lift, East Cliff Esplanade, Shanklin, due up on the 6th of March. East Cliff Promenade will be shut to pedestrians for these works. Shanklin Cliff Lift, Lift Road, Shanklin, due up on the 6th of March. The area around the cliff lift will be closed to pedestrians for these works. In the Cowes area we have the Watch House Lane, Cowes; 59 St Mary's Road, Cowes; development site, Castle Street, East Cowes; GKN, Clarence Road, East Cowes; 2 Sunhill, Cowes; 15 Alfred Street, East Cowes; North Road, 30 Sunhill, Cowes. Current hoardings, 272-283 Arctic Road, Cowes. Regarding the Newport area, Nippert Court, West Street, Newport; Diva Hairdressing; Ace Shoe Repairs, vacant premises, 91 to 94 Pyle Street; Newport Quay Hotel, Quay Street, Newport; Newport Minster, St Thomas Square, Newport; Willow Cottage, 23 High Street, Carisbrooke; Island Optical, 1 High Street, Newport, due up on the 24th of February; 131 Honey Hill, Newport, due up on the 24th of February; 6 Portland Street, Newport, due up on the 27th of February; 32 Chapel Street, Newport, due up on the 27th of February; rear of Flat 2, 55 Town Lane on the High Street, Sandown, due up on the 28th of February. And the current hoardings: McDonald's, 93 to 94 St James Street, Newport; Willow Cottage, 23 High Street, Carisbrooke, due up 20th of February. They will have traffic lights. In the Ryde area we have the Hair Centre, 13 to 14 High Street, Ryde; 26 Nelson Street, Ryde; 10 Wyndham House, Melville Street, Ryde; the Bag Shop, Ice Cream Shop and Fish and Chip Shop, corner of Union Street and Esplanade, Ryde; the Sloop Inn, Mill Square, Wootton Bridge; the Anchorage, Seafield Road, Seaview, scaffold is on Rope Walk; Sea Hill House, Pier Road, Seaview; Yardley, West Street, Seaview, due up on the 20th of February. In regard to the West White area, we have none reported. South White area, 2 Trinity Road, Ventnor; Spa Shop, 1 West Street, Wroxall; former Mill Bay Hotel, Esplanade, Ventnor; the White Lion, Black Gang Road, Knighton; and unlicensed obstructions, scaffold at 25 Union Road, Cowes. This week's In Touch in this week's episode, Dr. Tanvir Bush talks about a recent experience she had when she was involved in a hate crime as a result of her blindness. She also talks about her new novel, Cull, which is a satire exploring a world in which hate crimes are tolerated, resulting in what she calls the dehumanisation of disabled people. Tanvir is hoping to crowdfund the publication of this book. Also, Gough is an Australian comedian, writer, director who talks to Peter about his approach to filmmaking. He has formed his own production company and offers his work online. Plus, BBC Washington correspondent Gary O'Donoghue talks about his friend, the actor Tim Gebels, He was died aged 49 following a short illness.
And on with the county press for Friday, 24th of February 2017. And the headlines, there is only one, and I'll continue with the article immediately after. Mugged in her bed. 95-year-old's poem tells traumatic tale of horrifying home robbery. A 95-year-old woman can still picture the terrifying moment she awoke to find an intruder beside her bed, and she has written a moving poem to try to make sense of the ordeal. Marguerite Walker, known as Rita, still has flashbacks to the night 5 months ago that the heartless thief entered her flat in Ryde through a window and pulled her out of bed by her arm. The intruder forced Rita to show him where she kept her money, stored in a Bible, and stole £700 that she'd been saving for her grandchildren's Christmas presents. As the thug dragged her around the flat, he spotted a red striped blouse and said, "That's pretty," before grabbing it. He then warned her to keep quiet, turned out the lights, and took away her walking sticks. She lay there in fear for some time, in pain from an arm injury, before finding the courage to phone her son for help. Speaking to the county press in the hope that someone with some information will come forward and help catch the offender who is still at large, Rita said, "I don't like going to bed anymore. I can picture him standing there, but it's getting easier as time goes on. He took the Bible with all the money in, and he said he would put the Bible back through the door, but he never did. He stole my clothes, which was a surprise. My clothes are quite modern, they're not old ladies' clothes. I worked until I was 82, so I used to dress decently. So whether he's got a wife or anything, I don't know. I'd like him caught, because at this age I don't want to be made nervous." Barry Walker, Rita's 70-year-old son, said, "It must have been horrific. It beggars belief. When you're 95, you're at their mercy and you can't fight back." Police are still investigating the incident, which happened on September 14th. And the poem that she wrote, Fear by Rita Walker. "One night I woke. I saw a man standing next to my bed. I was frightened, very scared, as he stood and stared. My heart was racing. Who was he? What will he do to me? Oh, dear God, help me." I could not speak. Fear had taken away my voice. He said, "Where's your money?" I showed him where. I had no choice. Oh, I so wanted him to go. The police came round. I gave them the facts. I hope and pray he never comes back. Breaking and entering, it's called. It's heart-rending. I hope he is jailed. When he lugged me from my bed, he hurt my arm and my shoulder. It still hurts every day. I expect it's because I'm older.
Now we have campaigners launch survey on fixed link feasibility study. Fixed link campaigners have launched a survey to find out what people think about a study being undertaken into the issue. Campaigners from ProLink, the organisation set up in favour of a fixed link tunnel from the island to the mainland, want to find out whether people support an independent study. The online survey asks whether people think alternatives to the current cross-Solent travel option should be investigated. It also aims to find out whether people want a fixed link at all. The survey will have its results published from March the 31st in order for the May 2017 council election prospective councillors to view them as they present their campaign manifesto.
Tourist killed himself after assault on his senses. A chef threw himself from the first floor balcony at Bangkok Airport, Thailand, an inquest was told. Edward Baker, 35, who had suffered from mental health problems for years, including anxiety and paranoia, became overwhelmed by the assault on his senses he experienced when he arrived at the Far Eastern holiday destination, Isle of Wight coroner Caroline Soumaré concluded. She said, "The heat, humidity, noise and hustle and bustle, if you're already suffering from mental health issues, it must be really overwhelming." The inquest heard that Mr. Baker of Station Avenue, Sandown, had gone on the trip of a lifetime with his long-term close friend Edward O'Keefe, now 58, in November 2015. However, after a long-haul flight, the two men, known as Big Ed and Little Ed, became stuck in the airport when Mr. Baker refused to take a train to their next destination in Thailand. Mr. O'Keefe remained with his friend for 4 days at the airport, eventually persuading him to take a flight to the planned destination instead. However, as the pair were boarding the aircraft, Mr. Baker refused to get on, and Mr. O'Keefe went on alone. At the airport, an increasingly unwell Mr. Baker made a series of phone calls to the British Embassy, where his speech was slurred and confused as officials tried to arrange his flight back to Britain. They liaised with tourist police at the airport, but he managed to give security officers the slip and plunged from a first-floor balcony on November 27th. He suffered a traumatic head injury and died in hospital. Ms. Soumaré told Mr. O'Keefe he should not blame himself for Mr. Baker's death, and he had expressed considerable concern for his welfare. She concluded that Mr. Baker had killed himself while the balance of his mind was disturbed.
We have Firefighters Saved My Life by Blazeman. If it was not for that fireman, I would not be here. A pub manager has told the county press he owes his life to a firefighter who rescued him from his top-floor flat in Shanklin, which was engulfed in thick, choking smoke during a devastating fire. Dave Dixon, 62, described how he was woken by 2 loud bangs as fire swept through the flats in Shanklin High Street early last Saturday morning. 7 residents were evacuated, with 1 man taken to hospital suffering from smoke inhalation as fire ripped through the 3-storey building. He was plucked from an upstairs window by firefighters using a rescue ladder. At its height, 35 firefighters manned 6 pumps and 2 turntable ladders tackled the blaze. Mr. Dixon said, "By the time I woke up, there was a fireman at the top of the stairs saying, 'Can you get dressed?' As soon as I opened the door, there was a wall of smoke. If it was not for that fireman, I would not be here." Mr. Dixon, who works as an assistant manager at the nearby Crab Inn, also praised staff at Dacia's Hotel and other emergency services for their help. Debbie McCarthy, 47, manager at Dacia's Hotel, described how the hotel night porter, Michael Graham, and her 18-year-old daughter, Shannon Brown, served tea, coffee and breakfast to residents who had been evacuated during the blaze. The hotel is also looking after a pet parakeet. They have christened him Charlie, which was saved by firefighters. Mrs. McCarthy said, "It was a real community effort. Michael and Shannon were absolutely brilliant. I am very proud of everyone." Meanwhile, the owner of the ground floor, Brian Cook, furniture store, Kevin Cook, said smoke damage to his stock had run into thousands of pounds. However, he pledged the store would be up and running as soon as possible. The Isle of Wight fire and rescue officer in charge of the blaze, Jeff Walls, praised the team effort of emergency crews, plus the Red Cross, the Isle of Wight Council and Dacia's Hotel. A teenager was arrested by police on suspicion of arson following the fire. The 18-year-old has been bailed until March the 10th by police, investigating the cause of the blaze, which tore through flats in the High Street at its junction with Victoria Avenue. A 39-year-old man was also arrested on suspicion of arson and other offences. He was bailed until April 13th.
Fight Isle of Wight school cuts, MP told. Andrew Turner has been urged to tackle the government on education cuts that could spell disaster for island schools. Union leaders representing school and teaching staff have written this week to the island MP, calling on him urgently to take their concerns to Chancellor Philip Hammond. Following the introduction of the government's new education funding formula, island schools are facing a projected overall budget cut of $5.5 million over the next 4 years. As reported, primary schools look set to lose an average of £339 per pupil and secondaries £477 per pupil. Mr. Turner said a consultation was continuing and the figures were not set in stone. However, he agreed to press ministers. Island schools have been hit hard by budget cuts and job losses since schools' reorganisation, according to the unions. There have also been recruitment difficulties, leading the unions to brand the situation a potential disaster. In a letter to Mr. Turner, 6 union leaders said, "We are concerned about a position in which educational opportunities are certain to be further reduced or removed as a result of inadequate funding." They warned that children with special educational needs and those from poorer households would be disproportionately affected. Calling on the MP to press the Chancellor for more money, they said, "School budgets are being pushed beyond breaking point, and we believe it is imperative you press the government to make sure island schools can continue to deliver for all pupils." Mr. Turner said he would pass their concerns to the Isle of Wight Council, which was drawing up a response to the consultation. Echoing their concerns, he said, "Once the consultation response is available, I will be in a position to comment further, but it does seem clear to me that the right weighting has not been given to rural schools, and I know other MPs share that concern. I will be finding ways to proactively press ministers with the points that need making."
And French doctors battling to save the life of snowboarder Rhys Peasy are attempting to take him out of an induced coma this week to see if he can breathe on his own. As reported in the county press last week, Rhys, 22, is fighting for his life after he was struck by a hit-and-run driver in France earlier this month. He was working as a taxi driver at the French ski resort of Chamonix in the French Alps. The former Cowes High School pupil is on a life support machine with his mum, Suzanne, keeping a bedside vigil after he suffered a serious head injury in the accident on February the 2nd. Suzanne said, "They are gently taking him out of an induced coma. They can't do a CT scan until he is breathing on his own." She added, "It is very frustrating. We just don't know, and they can't tell us whether he will wake up." Rhys contracted pneumonia at the French hospital in Annecy, preventing doctors from trying to take him out of the coma until now. French police are also investigating the cause of the accident.
Court date for Coppins Bridge crash woman. A woman is due to appear in court next month, accused of drink driving, following an incident where a car plunged into the River Medina at Coppins Bridge, Newport, early on Saturday. Lucy Wilton, 29, of Northcliffe Gardens, Shanklin, will appear before Island magistrates on March the 7th, following the incident, which took place at around 1:20 a.m. The car, a Vauxhall Corsa, was recovered from the water and there was damage to railings at the bridge.
The disgraceful treatment of Westminster House staff who are facing pay cuts and redundancy after the Isle of Wight Council reduced the number of respite beds from 10 to 4 has been condemned by those who rely on the service. The cost-cutting plans were approved in September, saving the council £250,000 a year. Since then, the impact has been felt by those who rely on the Newport Respite Facility for people with learning disabilities and by staff. 7 of around 20 staff are facing redundancy due to the reduction in service. Angela and Christopher Ramsey of Southdown Road, Freshwater, whose 41-year-old daughter stays there for 2 nights every fortnight, said they would not be able to cope without Westminster House. It's vitally important. We are in our 70s, and without the respite care at Westminster House, we would not be able to keep our daughter at home. It would be impossible, said Mrs. Ramsey. 4 beds is not enough. I know people who have been turned away because there are no beds available. The staff do an absolutely brilliant job, and the way they have been treated is disgraceful. Mr. Chiverton, currently negotiating on behalf of staff for better terms and conditions, which could include redeployment to other care services, said the council wants to harmonise pay grades for all care staff, but it's disappointing to see they are being harmonised downwards. It reflects the low pay of care staff on the island and throughout the country. People pay lip service to the great work done by care staff, but in terms of pay, they are at the bottom of the pile. In addition to reducing the number of respite beds, the upper floor will be converted into residential accommodation for people with learning difficulties, currently living at the Laurel, Shanklin. The county press is asking the council for a comment, but has not yet received one at the time of it going to press.
Workshop plan to get bid defaulters to pay. Businesses which have still not paid the controversial white bid tourism tax have nearly halved since court action of nearly a fortnight ago. Now there are just 56, owing a total of £26,000. The tourism organisation Visit Isle of Wight, which brought in the levy, says that represents just 5% of businesses and confirmed that it has so far collected £376,000 to promote the island. Non-payers were pursued through the Magistrates' Court by the Isle of Wight Council, and it's now up to Visit Isle of Wight to decide what action should be taken against those who have still not paid. Magistrates issued a total of 101 liability orders against businesses. Our intention is not to punish non-payers, but to help them understand how effective the bid could be for their business if they worked with us, said Visit Isle of Wight Chief Executive David Thornton. We are inviting them to attend my 3-hour What's the Bid About and Why Are We Doing It workshop on March the 16th. If the remaining 56 pay at least some of the debt off before the workshop and then attend the workshop in person, we will remove their £80 liability for court costs and make an arrangement with them to make their levy payments over 2 or 3 months. We will see how many respond to this invitation and opportunity before we decide what is the next step to take. Among action that can be taken is sending in a debt collector.
And Bill, 95, to be a free man. War veteran and avid botanist Bill Shepherd is to be made an honorary freeman of Newport. Mr. Shepherd, 95, who was born in Orchard Street in 1921, will become the first person awarded the title in modern times. It is the highest honour the town can bestow, and will be presented next Sunday, March the 5th at Key Arts. The presentation will begin at 6 p.m. and it is open to all. It will be followed at 7:30 p.m. by a sideshow by Wayne Pritchett on the old pubs of Newport, for which a donation of £5 is requested.
Cliff Lift will reopen. Pledge. Concerns that the Shanklin Cliff Lift will not reopen at Easter have been raised by hoteliers. Speaking at Wednesday's Isle of Wight Council meeting, Christopher Quirk of the Shanklin Hotel and Accommodation Association said, "For the past 2 summer seasons, the cliff lift has not opened at Easter, as had traditionally been the case, instead not opening until much later in the season, at the height of summer. This has caused significant disruption to those working in the tourism industry and their guests. It's one of the first questions guests ask when booking their holidays." Councillor Richard Priest, who said a full £1 million had been spent on repairing and refurbishing the lift, was unable to give an exact date. It's hoped the lift will be open well before the start of the season. We are fully committed to opening it this year.
And some news here about taxation. Council tax will rise by 5% from April. Despite protests by opposition Isle of Wight councillors at Wednesday's budget setting meeting, the 4.99% increase proposed by the Tory-led leadership, the maximum allowable without a referendum, was approved along party lines by 18 votes to 16. 3% will be ring-fenced for adult social care. And we have some details of the budget key points. Council tax increased by 4.99%, an extra £69.68 per year for a Band D property. 7.5 million of cuts agreed, including cuts to care packages for disabled people. Floating bridge foot passenger charges increased from £1 to £1.50. Opening hours at Afton and Lynbottom Tips reduced. £10 charge introduced for replacement wheelie bins. Entire £17.5 million ASDA receipt allocated to capital projects. £100 million allocated over 2 years to establish a property acquisition fund. £1 million allocated to buy Kingston Marina and the Island Technology Park. £100,000 allocated to implementing 20 miles per hour speed limits.
Bridge to be closed for maintenance. Yarmouth Bridge is set to shut for several days while maintenance work is carried out. 4 wheels, integral to the opening and closing mechanism, are reaching the end of their working life and need to be replaced. The bridge will be closed from 8 a.m. on Monday, March 27th, and is scheduled to reopen at 5 p.m. on Saturday, April 1st. Island Road said the usual diversions would be in place and pedestrian access would be maintained during the work. Victoria Keefe, Island Road structures engineer, said, "We realise this work will have an impact on road users, but it is impossible to perform the maintenance and replace the wheels without a full closure."
And less grass cutting will keep Ireland beautiful. Cost-cutting plans to reduce the maintenance of grass verges will make the island more beautiful, it has been claimed. Isle of Wight Council leader, Councillor Dave Stewart, said reducing verge cutting, saving £11,000 a year, will also benefit the environment, as more wildflowers, bees and other insects would make the island greener and more desirable to visitors. Road safety would remain a priority, and verges near junction and blind bends would continue to be maintained, he said.
Dealership passed. A new car dealership in Cowes has been given the green light. Jackson's, the Channel Islands car dealership that owns Esplanade Garage, will set up a new garage and showroom on 3.2 acres of BAE Systems land at Three Gates Road next to Aldi. The plans include a glazed showroom, 40 parking spaces, a customer reception lounge and cafe, offices and an after-sales area with workshop bays, parts store and valeting facilities. The development has been granted conditional planning permission subject to a number of requirements, including the protection of trees in the area.
And we have here window smashed. Staff had an early morning call-out when a vandal triggered an alarm. A brick was used to smash a main 10-foot by 7-foot display window at Freshwater's Southern Co-op store in Afton Road. Police, who appealed for information, said the laminated window was broken soon after 2 a.m. on Tuesday. The store was open as usual with the area cordoned off. Anyone who has any information regarding this to call the police on 101, quoting 441 700 67 009.
Are these creatures a danger to my dog? Dozens of curious sea creatures have washed up on Apley Beach Ryde. Natalie Kelly came across 40 of the strange creatures while walking her dog, and after looking online, suspected that they may be sea hares. She said, "It seems they're a type of sea slug. However, I can't seem to find anything exactly like what I have found, and would really like them identified to find out if they are poisonous to dogs." A spokesperson at Blue Reef Aquarium, Portsmouth, said although it was difficult to identify species out of water, they believed the creature to be a sea hare and recommended it would be best to leave them alone. Sea hares are so called due to the 2 rhinophores that project upwards from their heads, which resemble the ears of a hare. They look very peculiar.
Mental health services will stay on the island even if they are no longer provided at St Mary's Hospital. As reported by the county press last week, the Care Quality Commission raised serious concerns about the island's mental health services. The Isle of Wight Clinical Commissioning Group, CCG, which buys healthcare services for the island, has confirmed mental health services will stay on the island even if it stops working with St Mary's to provide them.
Police exercise. Firearms officers boarded a Red Jet ferry in Southampton on Tuesday in a dramatic training exercise. Police and Red Funnel described the Hampshire constabulary operation involving Red Jet 4 as routine. Around a dozen officers boarded the boat in a scene caught on camera by staff at the nearby offices of Etch UK.
And we have a headline here, hoist at centre of Marine Park. A giant 200-ton hoist capable of lifting vessels as big as Red Funnel's Red Jet fleet will form part of the planned Kingston Marine Park along the River Medina. The huge hoist, costing an estimated £3.5 million, will be linked to a 140-metre pontoon, allowing large vessels to tie up before they are taken into the new marine park. However, funding for the new hoist has yet to be secured. The proposals were outlined at a meeting of Cowes Harbour Commission last Thursday. Commissioners also discussed the port master plan for Cowes, which includes ambitious plans to create world-class marine and manufacturing services in Cowes and East Cowes, and to boost employment for young people on the island in the marine industry.
Red Jet 3 given a lift. Is it a boat or a plane? No, it's a combination of both. A flying boat. This flying boat, Red Jet 3, was lifted from the water at the very spot where the old Princess flying boats were moored after construction at the Columbine Yard, now the Venture Quays, Union Flag Hangar, the home of White Shipyard. To enable the ferry to be refitted by the company, which previously won the contract to build the new Red Jet 6, her engines had first to be removed to reduce the weight before the big lift on Tuesday. The work on Red Jet 3 is just one example of White Shipyard's buoyant order book, the company said.
And we want our post box back. Elderly residents living in Rowan Gardens and Sylvan Drive, Newport, are demanding the return of their post box, removed a few years ago as it was on private land. Locals, many of whom are disabled and elderly, were able to use the post box at the nearby Sainsbury's superstore, but that too was removed 2 years ago, and the nearest post box is now in Newport Town Centre, or at the top of Honey Hill. Now at least 250 residents have signed a petition demanding Royal Mail reinstate a box closer to their home. And even the local postman has backed their campaign. Peggy Hyam, 78, of Rowan Garden, said, "Where I am, we are 3 little closes, and we are all aged over 60. A lot of people are in wheelchairs. When I took this petition round, even the local postman signed it." Kath Sessions, 49, also of Rowan Gardens, added it was not too bad when the postbox was at Sainsbury's, but when they took that away, it became a bit of a nightmare. The petition is being backed by the Conservative candidate for the Isle of Wight Council in May's election, Steve Hastings, and his wife, Beverly.
Appointment to train. A doctor's surgery is teaching patients CPR while they wait for their appointment. People visiting the Tower House surgery in Rink Road, Ryde, can watch a video and take part in a free demonstration in the waiting room. The surgery is offering sessions throughout the year as and when staff are available. One of the surgery's healthcare assistants, Sam Poor, led the first demonstration earlier this month. Practice manager Patrick Legg said the session was well received by patients. Patients can be waiting for their appointment for 15 minutes, so it's a really good use of their time, he said. There was a mannequin for patients to practice on, and a video was running in the background so that they could pick up on the skills. The surgery is also planning to host an information stand from Carers, Isle of Wight, in March.
A new mobile household recycling centre will be popping up across the island from next week. The mobile HRC will have a regular timetable of visits starting from Tuesday. The facility, provided by the council in partnership with refuse firm Amy, will encourage people to recycle more by accepting items such as household batteries and small electrical appliances that can't be collected as part of a normal household recycling collection. The mobile HRC will visit areas including Chale, Ventnor, Ryde, Lake, Newport, Yarmouth and Cowes.
Villagers facing 52% tax increase. Nettlestone and Seaview residents face a 52% hike in the amount of council tax they pay for services provided by their parish council. It will mean that Band D householders will pay 60 pence a week extra, in addition to the rises in the tax they pay to the Isle of Wight Council and the police. Chairman Councillor John Turner told Monday's parish council meeting, after not raising the precept for 3 years, it was time for an increase to pay for more services anticipated to be passed to the parish by the Isle of Wight Council. Taking on car parks and responsibility for maintaining areas, including Pool Park, could be on the agenda, and it was essential that the parish had the resources for it, he said. It will mean a Band D householder paying just over £34 a year, an increase of 66 pence a week. I think we should generate income to take over functions run by the Isle of Wight Council over the next few years. If we have money left over, we'll have to think again. Councillor Vicky Ford Moore said, "We want to be an active, not a reactive parish council." The rise, which was agreed unanimously, will contribute to raising more than £58,000 next financial year. Added to that will be a forecast £35,000 left over in balances at the end of this financial year. And that's all we have time for today. So it's goodbye from Sonara.
Goodbye from Barry, and we both hope that you have a very nice weekend and that the sunshine that is outside this window at this moment prevails over the weekend. Thank you.
Now, a change of voices. Today it's Peter Boffin and
Anne.
And here are some letters from who wrote to the paper from D.W. Ringrose of Yarmouth, who says, I phoned Brookside Health Centre at Freshwater on Thursday morning last week. I was given an appointment for that same afternoon and was seen promptly by a senior nurse practitioner. My prescription was faxed immediately to Yarmouth Surgery and was available for collection on my way home 20 minutes later. I think this example of superb care should be recognised in view of all the coverage of the problems in general practice.
And this is the letter of the week. It's from Dave and Wendy Wyeth of Newport. A very kind man found our gorgeous ginger cat, Sid, unconscious by the side of Staplers Road, Newport, this evening at around 6 p.m. He took our cat to pet doctors, and it looks like he's saved his life. Sid has suffered from a broken jaw, and there is a slight possibility he may have head injuries. The next 24 hours are crucial, but had it not been for the kind actions of a stranger, Sid would have died at the side of the road. Our Sid is a much-loved member of our family. The man didn't leave any details at the vet's, but hopefully he will see this heartfelt thank you. And then there's an editor's footnote at the bottom of this letter. Sid is now back at home, and although rather poorly, is receiving lots of tender loving care from his family. The Wyeths say they can't thank people enough for their kindness to Sid, particularly Paul from the Isle of Wight Driving Academy.
I hear somebody who's complaining about where to park. It's W. Wardrop of Cowes, who says, your money or your life. The well-known highway robbery demand is still relevant on the island today. On Saturday morning at a Cowes cafe, a 999 call had to be made, in which a first response vehicle and paramedic arrived prior to an ambulance with an apology for a later arrival than necessary. Incredibly, this was because the paramedic had to search for a parking space, as she was not allowed to park on double yellow lines. In 999 circumstances, time is of the essence as, of course, a patient can die. Seeking a parking space is an utter waste of possible life-saving time. Why is this essential frontline emergency service not exempt from such restrictions? The Isle of Wight Council needs to review all aspects of emergency service parking and in these circumstances explain why money is obviously more important than life itself.
And here is a letter from Ali Shaw of Ryde. She says, the doors of Ryde Arena have been closed since October the 2nd, but the building continues to be cleaned weekly and the lights have been on inside. So what's going on? My 12-year-old son, Oakley, broke down sobbing last Wednesday evening because he's missing ice hockey and training so much. He misses his friends, he misses the drills, he misses coming off the ice after a heavy session, sweating and steaming and feeling exhausted. After giving 7 years of his life to this sport, ice is flowing through his veins. He doesn't understand why AEW UK don't just give the rink back to the Isle of Wight Council so it can do something with the Ryde Arena. They could laminate floor it, he tells me, so we can at least play roller hockey. That wouldn't cost so much to run, he adds. A child's mind is so simple, yet he's completely right. These huge corporations which own our local facilities and amenities don't turn up to watch the figure skaters train. They don't show their faces at ice hockey matches, and they don't know of the pain and frustration our children are feeling, or the effects it's having on home and school life because they've closed our hub, our sports centre. Gosport is out of reach because we can't get there in time after school, plus it costs a fortune. We've thought about reinstating roller hockey, as there is already an adult recreational team that get together once a week. However, we're not sure if they will have a hall to use in the future, as Ryde Academy's current hall is being demolished over the summer as a new one is being built. It's still not clear if they will allow rollerblades in case their wheels and sticks mark the floors. The Isle of Wight Junior Ice Hockey Club, the IWJ-IHC, has already been barred from Sandown Academy as the kids' sticks mark the floor during off-ice training. It's inexcusable to take fun, exercise and development away from children. If the IWJ-IHC has to fold because it can't compete in the league anymore, it will take years to set up a new club. There isn't anything for our children to do in the largest populated town on the Isle of Wight. The statistics tell us we are an area of deprivation, so change it, please, Isle of Wight Council. For years, there's not only been no investment in young people's provision, but there have been cuts to youth services, cuts in the funding to sports, and we wonder why antisocial behaviour and childhood obesity is at such a high rate. As parents, we try to educate our children to become wholesome adults, but when things like this happen, we can't explain why.
Now, I wonder if you remember that some time ago, the government was a Labour government, and there was the Prime Minister was a man called Blair or something. But he's popping back into being seen a lot on the television and so forth. But then a man called T. Hack of Bryston says, "How exciting to hear Tony Blair's speech on Europe last week, and realising he was clearly returning to politics because he loved this country." He offers gravitas to the Labour Party, and you certainly wouldn't find him using the disrespectful B word in any debating chamber, as we've experienced here recently. He could root out the insipid Corbyn. Labour would be great again, and we'd have an effective opposition. Sadly, I soon realised that he had no intention whatsoever of doing anything for the country he so loves, being there, done that, whatever that means. I feel he is eyeing up the European presidency again. I say again because emails recently released by Hillary Clinton show that on Blair's hurried departure from UK politics, his senior advisor, Jonathan Powell, urged President Clinton to write an article in the German newspaper Die Welt supporting Blair for EU presidency. Clinton's advisors were highly reluctant, and it was never written. Undaunted, Blair changed tack and altruistically took on the unpaid post of Middle East peace envoy. There's no real evidence his presence ever had the slightest effect, but fortunately his companies just happened to secure profitable work there, so all was not entirely lost.
If contemplating the EU presidency, I hope Blair has liaised with David Cameron, who clearly has the same lofty pinnacle in mind. Otherwise, why would he have embarked on his grovelling, limp-wristed tour of Europe, making ridiculously anodyne demands under the guise of getting tough? The corrupt EU desperately needs mendacious leaders to cover the cracks, but if we do exist, neither man can become EU president. If we do exit, neither man can become EU president. So maybe their so-called patriotic motives for remaining in are highly suspect, even self-serving. By comparison, even Corbyn begins to look more palatable. This unseemly panic has arisen through Cameron stupidly breaking the cardinal rule of British politicians, i.e. con voters ad nauseum, that their will is paramount and sacrosanct, but never, ever at any cost actually let them have a referendum. Cameron did, and it's like Manchester United losing to City and piously insisting on returning matches until the result is the right one.
Oh, well, there you are. So, and Cliff Bennett of Yarmouth says, stick with the decision. One would have thought that having virtually bankrupted the country in his reign as Prime Minister and leading us into 2 unnecessary wars, Tony Blair should keep his head below the parapet for the rest of his life. Apart from the servicemen who lost their lives, many are still being persecuted for war crimes as a direct result of him leading the country into war because of weapons of mass destruction which never existed. Finally, he took the coward's way out and stood down, ultimately leaving Gordon Brown to take the flak for everything that he was responsible for. And rising like a phoenix from the ashes, he announces to everybody, we got it wrong on Brexit, and we should therefore have another vote. It takes your breath away. This man, who is personally responsible for so much that went wrong in this country, now has the gall to tell us that we need to reverse the Brexit vote. Do us a favour, Tony. See if you can find a pit with some WMDs in and jump in it.
And here is a letter from Spike Hughes of Bembridge. Bembridge Parish Council has made clear its intentions to sell numbers 5 to 7 High Street. Yet it still refuses to give any feasible reasons for this, other than to hint at money problems. Having looked at the accounts, I have taken advice and opinions from various sources, and I conclude the following. In the proposed budget account for 2017-18, there is a miscalculation of some £10,000, which means the parish precept should only be increased by £10,000 rather than by £20,000 that is being implemented. The wage bill of over £100,000 in a precept total of £160,000 is totally disproportionate at nearly 6.5%. The size of this wage bill is huge by comparison with similar towns and parish councils. In the last 2 years, it has increased by nearly 50% with no apparent increase in workload. The total precept for this and last year has increased by 28%. Further investigation is continuing. In conclusion, there is no real reason for the sale of numbers 5 to 7 High Street, which still turns a profit for the parish after maintenance and the management of the associated public toilets are included, except for the council's inability to manage the community's finances. I urge all local people to get involved. It's our money and our village. Ireland, as elsewhere, should also be beware. The Localism Act of 2011 is allowing local councils to behave in such undemocratic ways.
Well, that's the letters finished with, and now we are looking back. If you've got a good memory, if you can remember what happened 100 years ago on February the 24th, 1917. Demonstrating a curious sense of priorities given the outgoing war, the Isle of Wight Women's Temperance Association called for the outright ban of alcohol. The association proposed the nationalisation of the licensed trade and immediate prohibition. Thank you, ladies. And also, 100 years ago, following a recent debate on whether women should be suited to agricultural labour, an Ireland soldier serving on the Western Front responded with a letter, and the soldier received his regular copy of the county press while stationed in France, and wrote, "I say without fear of contradiction, there is nothing from the breeding of stock, dairy work, ploughing and harvesting of crops that a woman cannot do." And of course he turned out to be right.
75 years ago, February the 28th, 1942. In an effort to curb the plague of rabbits on island crops, it was announced that the price of Cymag gassing powder was to be reduced by 50% from March until August. And also, 75 years ago, Ireland Warships Week was launched to raise funds and morale. The advertisement for the propaganda tool claimed, "Your food, your work, your very life depend upon the constant vigil and attack of the Navy." Activities for work included gift sales, whist drives, dances and exhibitions, with all money raised going towards the construction of warships.
And 50 years ago, I would probably remember that, if I lived on the island then, Yarmouth Harbour Commission banned public dancing in the Pear Square during Carnival Week. Traditionally, the climax to the Yarmouth Carnival was a dance that attracted more than 1,000 revellers. However, the Harbour Commission wanted to reserve the space for car parking, prompting protests from Yarmouth residents and Carnival Committee. And for some time, the county press was the only newspaper delivered to an entire battalion stationed in the steaming jungles of Vietnam. It was being sent each week to Peter Isaacs, the 5th Battalion of the Royal Australian Regiment, by his mother, Mrs. J.A. Isaacs of the Royal Needles Hotel. In a letter home, Peter wrote, "The whole battalion, from the commanding officer downward, knows what the Calbourne Mothers' Union did at their last meeting." So that's a good thing then, isn't it?
25 years ago, February the 21st, 1992. 2 middle schools prepared to send a delegation of parents, head teachers and governors to Westminster in protest at education cuts. Money to relieve chronic overcrowding in island schools was cut from £1.6 million to just £88,000 by the Conservative government. And also 25 years ago, a tiny spaniel saved its pensioner mistress from being attacked by 2 masked men at her Bembridge home. Widow Denise Stubbs was confronted at her home, but the attackers were fought off by Josie, a Papillon toy spaniel. Remarkably, Josie was no taller than 8 inches, but still fearsome enough to best the would-be invaders.
And 10 years ago, February the 23rd, 2007, a man who said to his family was deprived of sleep for the 3 days and nights of the Isle of Wight festival and claimed his human rights had been breached. Richard Wilkins made a complaint to the European Court of Human Rights about the previous year's festival. He said, holding a 3-day festival so close to homes contravened Articles 1 and 8 of the Human Rights Act. He said, I think the Isle of Wight festival is a wonderful event, but it's in the wrong place. And now it's time for White Memories.
Seaplanes that flew out of Isle of Wight harbour dunes. It is now almost impossible to believe, but 100 years ago, Bembridge Harbour hosted a seaplane station among its dunes. Also called an air station, it played an important role in the aerial war against Germany. With little evidence to pinpoint its existence today, it seemingly vaporised at the end of the First World War. However, it is mentioned in a book about James Lindy Travers Jr. He was a pioneering British aviator. Born in London in November 1883, he joined the Royal Navy and quickly gained promotion. In May 1911, Sub-Lieutenant Travers earned his flying licence on a Farman biplane at Hendon. As Flight Commander Travers, he was posted to RNAS Calshot and lived at Old House Hamble. He was known as Jim to his friends and family and friends. In July 1914, Jim was something of a star attraction at the Royal Review of the Fleet in the Solent. The Calshot seaplanes were among the naval vessels anchored at Spithead. The evening before the King's inspection of the fleet, Travers took part in a flypast of the Victoria and Albert Royal Yacht, Jim piloting the Bat boat designed by Tom Sopworth of Saunders Row. In January 1915, he was promoted to squadron commander at RNAS Calshot. In the biography Cross Country about the 3 aviators Travers brothers, Jim is credited with overseeing the building of aircraft hangars at Bembridge Point in 1915. This was to establish a strategically important seaplane outpost east of Calshot. In the event of a German attack in the English Channel, the Bembridge seaplanes were a vital 15 minutes closer to the enemy than Calshot-based aeroplanes. In June 1915, Jim married Hilda Nancy Edwards, known as Nancy, at Holy Trinity Church, Bembridge. The bride and her parents, Captain Frank Ashton Edwards and Hilda Edwards, lived at the Grange, and Nancy was secretary to Bembridge branch of the Naval League. Because of the war, they decided to keep the wedding low-key, out of respect to islanders mourning their fallen loved ones. A jolly occasion seemed inappropriate. However, the village folk decided otherwise, because the Edwards family and bridegroom were held in high regard, and the locals welcomed a reason to celebrate. Bunting was hung, the church was decorated and filled with friends. Naval airmen from the seaplane station formed the Guard of Honour, while coastguards and signalmen of the Royal Naval Reserve were also in attendance. The wedding cake was topped by a model seaplane. Wedding presents included gifts from mechanics and staff of Bembridge Seaplane Station, officers and staff of Calshot Seaplane Station, the Naval League, and the officers of the seaplane tender and aircraft carrier HMS Campania.
And when the war ended in 1918, Jim went into aircraft design. He was decorated in 1920 with the Star, Victory and British War medals, but in February 1924 the national newspapers carried the tragic news that Lieutenant Colonel J.L. Travers OBE died when the monoplane he was flight testing at Croydon crashed. Tributes paid to him included: aviation has lost one of its pioneers and most enthusiastic supporters. One of the other servicemen based at Bembridge. One was air mechanic first grade Alfred Albert Smith, RNAS, who received the Distinguished Service Medal in 1918 for completing 200 hours of operational flying out of Bembridge Seaplane Station. Albert's rare medal was sold at auction in 2012 for £1,000. And the Seaplane Station disappeared from Bembridge in the 1920s, but not entirely from the island. In February 1920, the Ministry of Munitions advertised its disposal with New Bembridge Aerodrome. Bids were invited to buy the building and the equipments, and the advert lists aircraft hangars and various brick and corrugated iron buildings for sale. 2 hangars were bought and still stand today on the island, albeit heavily disguised in their modern use. One is a Ventnor seafront business, Gaiety Amusements, the other the Summer Amusement Arcade on Shanklin seafront. Island aviation enthusiasts point to the 3rd hangar being bought and moved to Lindhill Ryde, where it became the Ryde Motors Workshop. And it was pulled down in recent years to make way for the town's new travel lodge and affordable built housing behind. And the hangar metal frame went for scrap. Now, do photographs exist of the hangars being dismantled and erected again on their new sites? I would be interested to know if the brick and corrugated buildings photographed by a friend when it was in a bad state of dereliction on Bembridge Embankment was in any way associated with the seaplane station. Even if it was not connected, I would be interested to know more about it. So if you do have information, you can contact Richard W. at iwcpmail.co.uk. There, how exciting.
And memories requested by Anne Grant, who wants to know who was the doorman in the aubergine greatcoat outside Theatre Royal. She says, Alan Stroud's nostalgic look back at island cinemas brought to mind a nameless doorman who was employed by the Theatre Royal in Ryde. To me, as a small child in the 1950s, this gent seemed to be part of the fabric of the town. A figure of authority who was always there, familiar to regular filmgoers at the Royal. I can picture him now, dressed in an aubergine greatcoat with matching trousers and peaked hat. He was tall, straight-backed, with shiny, polished shoes. He had the air of ex-military about him. To my young eyes, he seemed elderly, but probably wasn't. Stills from the main film were put in display frames on the walls next to the entrance doors. I can recall this doorman saying to me on more than one occasion as I studied the stills, "That film's not for you, missy." The film was obviously not U-rated. The doorman took his duties seriously and never allowed underage youngsters into A and X movies. As Alan Stroud recalled in 1960, the Theatre Royal was free of vandalism, unlike the Commodore and Scala. Looking back now, I wondered if the Royal was trouble-free because this doorman ensured it was so. Can anyone name him and supply a picture?
Now, and there's a photograph of the old Theatre Royal. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 stories going up and up and up and up.
This is an article by Matthew Chatfield.
Ah.
Is there a legal right to collect firewood? About this time of year, I always get a query or two about firewood. There's the idea going around rather conveniently there is a legal right for anyone to take fallen wood to burn at home. A typical inquiry was this one from Graham. I understand common folk were given the right to collect firewood for personal use from common land as part of the Great Magna Carta. Or have these rights gradually disappeared as land has been stolen by the landed gentry? So is he right? Actually, no. There is no general right in English law to collect wood. All wood belongs to somebody, normally the person who owns the tree it grew on. You can't take it away without their permission. It's as simple as that. The fact plenty of people do help themselves to fallen wood doesn't make it legally right that they do. It's a practical way of getting rid of surplus wood, as any ranger or forester knows. If someone asks you for your employer's wood, you normally have to refuse. But if you haven't been told to bring back the firewood, then just pile it neatly by the side of the path, and next morning it will mysteriously evaporated. Very convenient, but not a legal right. But what about Magna Carta? There was a story a few years ago about how the Forestry Commission has scrapped the right enshrined in the Great Charter of Runnymede in 1215 of picking firewood from woodland. However, it then rather feebly went on to explain how previously wood gatherers had to buy a licence to collect wood, and now they can't. So if you're buying a licence, it's not much of a sacred right, is it? And if you look at the actual charter, it doesn't say anything of the sort. Still, the Magna Carta is to country law debates what Godwin's law is to much online discussion. If someone won't stop going on about King John and Runnymede, it's fairly safe to assume they're balmy and ignore them. Finally, and not entirely relevantly, there is that splendid bit of law called the 4 Fs, which are fruit, fungi, flowers, and foliage. It's a reassuringly archaic fact under English common law. You can normally pick the 4 Fs if growing wild for non-commercial use anywhere you legally go. Firewood is not the 5th F, by the way. Sorry. So, for example, on a country park or walking along a right-of-way, we can gather the 4 Fs. This is a right I exercised last Christmas. I went into a public wood and collected holly and ivy to decorate the house. As it happened, after Twelfth Night had gone, I burnt some of them. So, I suppose, in a way, I was legally collecting fuel for the fire.
Mm-hmm. And now, if you have a slight interest in the odd drop of alcohol, perhaps you'd like to hear what Jake Harrison has to say, because he says the occasional tincture is a tonic. Yes, dreary January has passed. Most of our New Year's resolutions have gone out of the window, and we can stop pretending we like green juices. And I can once again pick up a bottle of beer without feeling like a booze-craving criminal. Fantastic. So, buckle up, liver. And to my wallet, I suggest you brace yourself. All jokes aside, I will admit I honestly couldn't wait to see the back of Dry 2nd January. Goodbye and good riddance, never again. I haven't got a problem with the challenge. I did it fine, and I admire anybody who takes it on. I just think it's a bit pointless, that's all. And I started to go out of my mind with booze-free boredom. Who are we trying to fool? We all missed it, we just didn't want to admit it. It's left me intrigued, though I would like to find out why exactly people throw themselves into a month of spinach smoothies and early nights. Let's be honest, post-Christmas January is boring and a bleak month. Cold and miserable, and one of the pleasures that helps us get through it is forbidden from us for 31 torturous days. How's that for cruel irony? How I managed it, I'll never know. There were some benefits, however. It was lovely to wake up, hangover-free, smug, fresh and clear-minded every morning without feeling like the back end of a badger. My sleep pattern improved, my bank account looking healthy, and my liver was content. Apart from that, though, I suppose another dry scent January is a good way to recontract your relationship with alcohol. We're often found guilty of saying, "Oh, one more wouldn't hurt," so it's a good way to cut back and save a few more pennies. I didn't see any other upsiders, but although I didn't find myself any happier or more positive, just far more bored and irritating towards my girlfriend. I even put on a few extra pounds. I miss the colour, the refreshment, the light and the shade, and the gentle reminder of the importance to treat yourself after a hard day's slogging away. I feel guilty every time I walk past the pub or the beers, wines and spirits aisle in my local supermarket. This was definitely not for me. And this raises an important question. Why do we do it ourselves? Is it peer pressure? Social media? Are we all too hard on ourselves? What did we learn from it exactly? Why can't we go further? And why January? Once January was up, we couldn't wait for the next booze-fueled bender, asking ourselves, what the hell was that all about? We toasted, cheered and celebrated, going back on the slippery sherbets. Right. Makes sense, doesn't it, eh? Why, though? What really is the point of an alcohol-free month, if in the next we drink enough to drain the Solent and retreat back to our old haunts and old ways? It's beyond bizarre. If you can beat January and make yourself proud, then why undo all your hard work in February? But is it really worth it? Most of us lead normal lives and work hard, take our kids to school, pay our taxes, our bills and rent, so we are really going to reward ourselves with a glass of water and a constant cups of green tea every evening? I really don't think so. We're being far too hard on ourselves, if you ask me. Drink in moderation is fine. It's the excess that can sneak up on you. There are many health benefits from the occasional glass of Merlot. It's acclaimed alcohol in small doses can even reduce the risk of heart disease and strokes. And if too much booze is bad for you, then it's also worth remembering stress is an even bigger killer. It's worth remembering excessive amounts of alcohol can potentially harm you, physically and mentally. It's very easy to drink too much at the wrong times. Alcohol is not a program solver, rather a potential creator. Constantly consuming copious amounts of your favourite tipple would put you at a serious risk of liver and heart disease, stomach ulcers and sexually transmitted diseases from unsafe sex. Mentally, too much booze will probably result in sleep deprivation and depression. Moderation is key. There's nothing wrong with a few more here and there. Just act responsible and sensibly. Most importantly, stay in control. We shouldn't put pressure on ourselves. After all, the pressures of modern life are more than enough to take. We shouldn't feel bad. Rewarding ourselves occasionally can be very healthy and benefiting. So, guzzle away, people, and don't you dare feel guilty for it. Life's far too short, as they say.
Behind the News this week is headed Hope Rising from the Ashes. Just over a year ago, a devastating fire ripped through the industrial heart of Cowes. Millions of pounds worth of damage was caused to businesses in Medina Yard after sparks from a welding operation ignited the blaze that tore through the Cowes classic boat building industry on January 25th. Despite efforts to put out the fire, flames quickly spread to the roof of the TJ Motors unit at Medina Village. Irreplaceable craft and thousands of hours of work were lost as the fire took hold of interconnected units. At the height of the blaze, huge plumes of smoke could be seen across the River Medina and as far away as Ryde. A total of 7 engines, 2 aerial ladders, and a command unit and 40 firefighters responded. 3 crews were also sent over from Hampshire to provide cover. Workers were evacuated, and a 250-metre cordon was set up by police after fears gas cylinders could explode. Casualties from the blaze included the Cowes Etchells class fleet, which lost more than half their number, the Dunkirk little ship Vera, which was in storage at the yard during the winter, and the Fedoa, a 60-foot ketch built in the 1920s, which was being restored by Morton Marine and was agonisingly close to being launched. 1 year later, the site has been cleared of debris and is destined to become part of the already planned huge redevelopment. But a question mark still hangs over how much of the total area will become housing and how much will be retained for industrial use. Among the business owners to watch in horror as the fire engulfed Medina village were the bosses of clothing firm Rapa Nui. 1 year on, the company has moved to new premises in Freshwater, but company founder Rob Drake Knight recalled how the company lost the best part of a month's production following the fire. He said, "We had some pretty significant smoke damage and lost quite a bit of stock. The site was going to be knocked down anyway, so for us it just speeded things up a bit. We left the site at the beginning of September and we are now in Freshwater." He added, "It's a bit of a sad story. The unit in Cowes was old and decrepit, but it was really good site on the island for small enterprises because units were available, and it's a real shame they've gone. Small businesses now have to take next size up units, which are much bigger risk. Obviously, the fire had an impact on the business, but we had to deal with it and move on. The community in Freshwater has been great and very welcoming." A commercial Good Samaritan threw a lifeline to Clive Ford and Robert Blakely of FB Fabrications, who had only just escaped in time as their premises filled with black smoke and the roof started to melt and fall in. "We could only stand behind the cordon with other workers and business owners and watch as the fire brigade struggled to contain the blaze, wondering if we would have anything left when it was all over," said Clive. The next morning, they were numbed to discover nearly everything had been destroyed. But, by a twist of good fortune, materials they needed to build 2 rigid aluminium boat hulls were late being delivered and missed the fire.
And later that day, Isle of Wight businessman Mark Board of Jam & Sons, whose premises on the edge of the Medina yard was untouched by the fire, offered space for FB to build the 2 boats and hire the equipment and tools needed for the build. 1 year on from the blaze, Clive said the pair were in the process of rebuilding their business. He said, "Financially, we lost everything. Lots of welding plant and machinery, computers, stationery, records. We lost something like 70 to 80% of our equipment. The fire affected us a lot financially. We wondered if it was worth keeping going. If I was as well off as I was 2 years ago, I would be laughing, but it's now the case that we are building the business back up." Another casualty of the blaze was the Cowes Carnival Association, whose float was destroyed, as well as other equipment. Chairman of the Cowes Carnival Association, Lynn Hammond, said the carnival had then, phoenix-like, risen from the ashes of the blaze, thanks to the support of local people, and had relocated to a base in Bridge Street. She said, "We were devastated last year. For me, it was 15 years of my life just gone. We were determined to bring the carnival back, but there were so many times we wished we'd let the carnival die with the fire. However, people were absolutely fantastic, and we could not have brought it back without the help we had. We should have named it the People's Carnival. Help came from everywhere. We would not have done it if it wasn't not for the help of so many great people on this island. And the site, owned by the Harrison Trust, is destined to be turned into housing and marine businesses as well as leisure uses. The scheme will be divided into 3 phases, with the first including the ongoing work to preserve the iconic hammerhead crane. However, local councillor and owner of the Corby Yachts, Councillor John Corby, restated his desire that more of the site destined for homes could be turned over for industrial use. "It's the most wonderful area to set up a boatyard," he said.
Among the casualties of last year's fire were 6 historic X1 design sailing boats. However, one of the craft is set to rise from the ashes thanks to marine business based in Thorley. Nick Whittle, boss of Whittle Marine at New Close Farm, Hill Place Lane, is currently restoring one of the boats after buying its iron keel for £500. The keel was all that was left of the boat Delight, sail number 75, after the Inferno tore through the yard last January. Delight was a Yarmouth-registered boat and dates from 1938. Nick is rebuilding its graceful lines from the keel up. He said, "There was literally nothing left of it except the keel, and keels were made out of pig iron. Once rebuilt, the former Delight will be given a new name and sale number before it is launched, hopefully in May this year.
And now, a few things that are going to happen here on the jolly old Isle of Wight. There's going to be the tale of the dairyman's daughter, and the short life of Elizabeth Wallbridge, the daughter of a farm labourer and dairyman, was spent in uneventful poverty, yet the story of the dairyman's daughter, as she was dubbed, became known worldwide. Her birthplace at Hale Common and her grave in Arreton Churchyard became Victorian tourist attractions, and her name is, of course, remembered by a pub. The person responsible for her unexpected fame was Lee Richmond, the curate of Brading from 1797 to 1805, who visited her during her last illness and recorded her remarkable story. Her details, as told by Richmond, were published as an article and a booklet, and then incorporated in his best-selling Annals of the Poor. And 40 years after it first appeared, it had been translated into 19 languages and sold millions of copies. A talk at Carisbrooke Castle Museum on Tuesday at 2 p.m. will go into more depth about her family and early life. People will also be able to view the visitors' books from her cottage, containing signatures including the Duke of Wellington. And these books, covering the period of 1822 to 1868, show visitors were so interested in the tale they came from far-flung places including America, Canada, China, Australia and Ireland, as well as places scattered across the UK. And for information and to book a place at the talk, email info@Carisbrooke Castle Museum, all one word, .org.uk or phone on 523 112.
The world's favourite sleuth, Sherlock Holmes, and the character's portrayal on the silver screen is the subject of a show at Freshwater Library next month. Freshwater Bay film expert and author Tony Dalton, who through his work for the British Film Institute and Granada TV has accrued a wealth of knowledge on the history of cinema, will be giving an illustrated lecture on March the 7th. Hosted by Friends of Freshwater Library, the lecture starts at 7:30 p.m. and seating is limited.
There. So after that exciting view, I think it's probably time for us to say farewell.
So it's goodbye from Anne.
And it's goodbye from Peter. Goodbye.
Bye.
This is a download from the BBC. For more information and our terms of use, go to www.bbc.co.uk/in-touch. Good evening. Tonight, breaking into the arts and changing attitudes. Do the two go together? We hear from the visually impaired novelist who's writing a book about hate crime, but during the process experienced it herself. And the blind Australian filmmaker who takes a can-do attitude to the nth degree. But first, we know about life imitating art, but most writers surely don't expect to see their words come back to bite them quite as directly as those of Dr. Tanveer Bush. Tanveer has almost completed her second novel, with the theme of what she sees as a backlash against disabled people after the heady days of 1990s anti-discrimination law. We got the taste of what she means a few weeks ago when Les Lightfoot described a vicious attack on him in his own apartment block. Tanveer has recently had a similar experience.
I was walking down a very narrow lane and I had heard this noise, and out of the blue, 6 guys on 3 bikes came thundering towards me up the hill. And they were pretending to run me down, but actually I didn't know they were pretending. I thought that they were actually going to hit me, and there was no space for me to move out of the way. I could just hear them yelling, "Get out the way," and hear their bikes. And it was very frightening. And as they went past the second bike with those 2 young men, I could hear their voices. One shouted out after me, "Don't worry, she can't see, she's blind anyway."
Can you describe what goes through your mind when faced with this kind of situation?
It's an intense adrenaline that comes when there's nowhere to go. So you just go for brace position because you're not sure what's going to happen. And then when it happens the second time, it becomes anger Because for me, my flight, which was stopped because I couldn't go anywhere, was becoming fight.
So how did you react?
When the third bike came, they came on my near side, and I reached out and grabbed them off the bike, which shocked me, hugely shocked me. I had no idea I was going to do that. The lad who was, had come off the bike then went, well, we're going to call the police on you because you pulled us off our bike. At which point I realised, of course, I've got to phone the police. So I asked him to phone the police and he ran away. But they were right, because when I did speak to the police, I couldn't give any detail. I had silhouettes, I had voices, and I had no detail.
Now, Les, who we had on the programme a few weeks ago, he said, don't fight back. And that's the advice the police usually give. And it's kind of common sense. Does it fit with your instinctive response?
In that instance, I couldn't have stopped myself. I realised I shouldn't have when I realised the guy was quite a lot bigger than me. But in that instance, it was the most cathartic thing I did, actually. Still, when I go back into that feeling of reaching out and just stopping them, it felt good.
Right. Now, you're a writer. We've featured a book of yours before on the programme, and your latest book has explored what happens if this tendency of hostility to disabled people kind of gets out of hand. Stay with us, because we're going to explore that. We'll come back to that if we may. But I've also been talking to someone who, despite having only 10% vision, has chosen the medium of film rather than writing to express himself. He's created a number of short films which take the form of satirical interviews. He's also created a long film which is a kind of self-portrait of his experience of growing up and being visually impaired in Australia. He goes by the name of Goff, and his films are real DIY efforts. He scripts them himself, he shoots them, he directs, he edits. And when I spoke to him the other day, I suggested to Goff that by using film, he was making life just about as hard for himself as he possibly could. Wouldn't a more practical medium for him to tell his story have been radio?
I actually did start in radio as an audio producer. So I was making the radio station's commercials and promos and all of that kind of stuff. And that taught me a lot about directing talent for a start, because obviously you need to be able to tell the voiceover actor how the client wants their commercial read, and also editing. So it also gave me a good idea of how to edit things, because as you know, working in radio, I mean, things have to be timed precisely. So it taught me those two skills, which have helped a lot going forward into making the movies.
How much help do you get, and on what sort of basis?
Well, Simon is the guy who I charge with helping me the most. For example, he points the camera where I tell him to point it. Obviously, I write the project, so I know how I want my lines delivered. But then, of course, Simon needs to tell me that, yes, the actors are doing the facial expressions that I want them to do, and then the same can be said when we're editing. So I'll say to Simon, well, I'm happy with these two takes. They both sound really good. Which one looks better? So there is a lot of trust that has to go into it to make it work.
Let's talk about the material specifically. I mean, because you've done a long film, which is essentially really about your life. What messages were you trying to get across there?
Sure. Well, the film is called I Will Not Go Quietly, and it is a documentary about disability and mental health. And it was brought about because I found myself getting very frustrated with people not having an understanding of my disability, essentially. And so I thought the best way to educate, for the want of a better word, was to turn it into a film. So yes, it is about me personally, but I've interviewed 24 experts in a range of different fields. So school teachers, psychologists, even a dating expert, to talk about what it's like to date when you've got a disability and all that sort of stuff. And everybody gives varying opinions and views. We've even got some comedians that give their input into different things, because obviously I don't want people to get all depressed when they're watching my work. And so for people with a disability, I would hope that they would watch it and think, well, you know, it's not just me going through these particular problems and issues, you know, other people have as well. And for people who don't have a disability that watch it, hopefully they do get a little bit of education from it and understand a bit more what people with a disability face and what they have to go through to achieve what they want to achieve.
It's quite an acerbic style, Gough. I mean, some would say angry. Are you angry about the things that have happened to you?
I think I used to be. I think that's a fair question. I think I used to be. And then I realised that I'm better off channeling that kind of emotion into doing positive things. And so that's when I really ramped up my production work, and we really started to do a lot of work, because being angry, it's a waste of time, to be honest with you, because things are what they are. So you can either spend your time being the victim and being angry, or you could spend your time being productive and doing what you actually want to do and what you actually want to achieve.
Now, as you say, you've set up your own company, and so effectively you're your own publisher. Have you tried to sell this material to others, to big companies, to the national networks?
Absolutely. And when they see a blind filmmaker, they kind of don't want to know anymore. It's just ignorance, really, that they don't understand how that could possibly be so they won't even view the work. So again, that was part of the reason why I did the documentary, was to show them that, yes, I can actually do this kind of stuff.
But let me ask you a straight-talking Aussie question. Can you actually make any money out of this if you're doing it yourself?
Well, that's why I do it like I do it. So people download a project and every single cent goes back into making the next project. It's very straightforward.
I went to the supermarket the other day. I got 1 egg and 1 tomato. I got to the girl behind the checkout. She said, "You're single, aren't you?" I said, "How could you tell?" She said, "'Cause you're ugly."
Now, you mentioned that you use comedy. In fact, you used to do stand-up, didn't you?
That's correct. Yeah, I spent, I toured the UK. Back in 2003, I lived in the UK and I did stand-up throughout the UK. It was really fantastic. I had an amazing time, and for the most part, the comedy went really well too.
So I went next door to the drugstore. I got to the girl behind the counter. I said, "I need a packet of condoms." She looked at me. She said, "No, you don't."
Is this, as a career path, as it were, is this sustainable, do you think, Gough?
No doubt at all. This is absolutely what I want to do, and I don't see any reason why I shouldn't do what I want to do. I mean, I think I can be a really, really entertaining filmmaker, and I've got absolutely no plans in stopping. Beer Nuts Productions is here for the long haul. There's no doubt about that.
Well, that's Gough, clearly banging his own drum and happy to do so. My guest, Dr. Tanvir Bush, has been listening to that, and indeed you've been a filmmaker yourself. Did you move from films to books deliberately to take account of your deteriorating vision?
I did. I was a documentary producer and I needed to be able to drive, I felt, and to be able to move my crew around safely. When I felt that was getting more and more difficult, and when I was having to rely on other people to tell me about what was going on in terms of editing, and I couldn't trust myself in the same way, then I decided that I wanted to move on to something else. But I think that being visually impaired does not stop you being obviously a filmmaker in any form, producer, director, actor, not at all.
So your latest book, Cull, brings us back to this idea of, first of all, the kind of hate crime as it's been defined that you're talking about there, and also these kind of increasingly negative attitudes towards disabled people. Can you just put that into context for us?
Yes. My novel Cull explores what would happen if discrimination against disabled people went further and became an accepted part of everyday life.
Do you have a sense, is what you're saying here is that we're in the middle of maybe what you could describe as a backlash? We went in the 90s through the whole anti-discrimination legislation. Do you think you're seeing a backlash to some extent?
I do. I think that it's become this issue around blaming the person rather than blaming the system. And that has become very, very demoralising and difficult for anyone with a disability, especially if you're someone with a disability who relies on extra support, used to rely on your independent payments, or relies on benefits of any sort. You're beginning to feel guilty.
You've got an extract that you're going to read for us. Can you just put that into context for us?
My protagonist is a visually impaired part-time journalist who is desperate to find other work as well to pay her way for her and her guide dog to survive. And she stumbles on the Ladies Defective Agency, a wonderful secret organisation of disabled women who run a phone sex line. And they look after each other in this current climate of another England. So that's the setting. Like Alex, many of the staff at the Ladies Defective Agency worked 2 jobs or cared for other disabled or vulnerable relatives when not on shift. Between the Believe in Better campaigners and the various Shopper Scrounger media campaigns, being a high-visibility crip, especially in a wheelchair or on a mobility scooter, was asking for trouble. Most of the ladies had to wear rain hats and keep cling film wrapped around their shoulders to protect them from spittle. It could come from anyone, neighbours or school children, but it came. And most buses no longer stopped and trains no longer bothered with special seating for crips. How did the advert go? If you can't fit, you can't sit.
This isn't meant to be contemporary, is it?
It's another England. This is a satire. I know I'm sounding incredibly serious and miserable, but I know that the way to reach people is to make them laugh. And so I'm writing about an England where the compassion has completely drained away, where discrimination is absolutely rife, and where hate crime is exponentially on the rise. Some people would say that has happened in some disabled communities already, but I'm taking it one step further.
Can I just ask you, you're crowdfunding this book, I believe. Just thinking back to what Gough was saying, do you think it is hard to get disability out there in films or indeed in books in a way that you think really says something sharp?
I do. I think there is far too much what is known as inspiration porn. I think we've come across where if it's a memoir about someone who's overcome something incredible, then you're more likely to get published. But to get literary fiction, to get disabled characters that are not just purely there for their disability, but that are 3-dimensional and have their own way in the world, I think that's much harder.
But will the crowdfunding work, do you think?
Well, this is the thing. I am working with a group called Unbound, and they help the authors host on their web pages their crowdfunding pages, and they support them through this process. So for me, if you like the idea of the novel, you can pledge. And basically what you're doing is pre-buying the book. So if you pre-buy and we get to a certain level, for us it's about £12,000, we know we've got 500 people that have bought the book. The book then goes to cover design, edit and publish.
Dr. Tanvir Bush. Finally today, some very sad news also from the world of the arts. Actor Tim Gebels has died at the age of 48 after a short illness. Tim was a regular contributor to this programme. He also worked as a BBC drama producer for a while. But he made a great success of one of the most challenging professions a blind person can take on. He worked as an actor in the theatre, in film and also on TV. But perhaps the highlight of his career was his role in the landmark 2009 Channel 4 series Cast-Offs, a drama about a group of disabled people dumped on a desert island as the contestants in a fictional reality TV series. Talking on In Touch at the time about his initial fears over how a blind actor could actually cope with things like giving the right eye line, he explained how his self-confidence had grown over the years.
I used to worry a lot about this at the beginning of my career when I was doing telly, because if you're blind, you can't really do eye lines. I can't do eye lines. But certainly within drama, and factual telly might be a bit different, but within drama, programme makers are starting to realise that if they're going to use disabled people and put disabled on screen, that intrinsic in that is shooting the reality. So why do you want a blind person on your screen to be able to do eye lines? Do you want them to look like a sighted person? Well, I can't do that. My body language is different, my facial language is different, my physicality is different. And, you know, a lot of us have spent a lot of our lives being ashamed about that, but actually that's the reality. So to you as a director or, you know, producer of a TV, do you want to shoot the reality or do you want me to look acceptable in some weird way?
One of Tim's closest friends is the BBC's Washington correspondent Gary O'Donoghue, and Gary is taking a break where we've caught up with him in Havana. Gary, your memories of Tim?
Peter, I mean, he was a true friend to me. We met in short trousers, literally, and 2 special schools together. We went through Oxford together, and we were very close during our adult life. He was my best friend. There's no question about that. He was also a person, from my point of view, who was always contributing. As you know, he was an accomplished actor, but he didn't just pursue his own career. He did a lot of education around audio description in theatres in that area. He became a guide dog owner as an adult, but he then became a client representative and gave up an awful lot of his time, free of charge, to Guide Dogs, the organisation. And I remember he was a great Doctor Who fan, Peter, and he used to collect all their DVDs. I think he has a full set, but he wasn't content with that. He would bang on the BBC's door in the early days and say, why aren't you including the audio description track on these DVDs? And he made that happen. It was a real campaign for accessibility, technology to information, and a sort of physical sense. He even took a case at one stage and won when he was denied access with his dog. So I've lost a real friend, and it's that's irreplaceable from my point of view. But I think the community has lost someone who made a huge contribution. He was very much, Peter, a giver rather than a taker, and I was one of the lucky people who was on the receiving end of that.
Gary O'Donoghue on the life of actor Tim Gebels. Our sympathy goes to Tim's family and his friends. As always, you can call our action line on 0800 044 044 for 24 hours after the programme, where you can find out more about the work of Dr Tanveer Bush and the filmmaker Gough. You can email in touch at bbc.co.uk. That's it from me, Peter White, producer Cheryl Gabriel, and the team. Goodbye.